Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Webdelics Podcast, where we're on a journey to find out the truth about plant medicines and psychedelics, get rid of the myths, and change the narrative. I'm your host, Scott Mason, and with us today is the one and only Stephanie Traeger. Stephanie, welcome to the show.
Hello, Scott. It's great to be with you.
It is great to be here, too. Stephanie, tell us a little bit about yourself.
It's a big question.
Hey, why not go big?
I live on a waterfall in New Jersey, and it's been a long and windy journey to get here. Yeah.
I want to live on a waterfall. I want to live on a waterfall. That's not fair.
Yeah. Well, this waterfall, the first time I came here, this is a good way to back in. This waterfall, the first time I came here and saw this spot, I was like, Arutam. And interestingly, in 2012, I was in a beautiful place in the Amazon in Ecuador.
Whoa.
Where I was. This is a really deep story, so I don't want to just drop into it. However, I was visiting an Indigenous group there, the Ashuar, and had the honor and blessing and privileged to be not initiated into anything, but initiated into the space of their territory. And you have to go through this waterfall. They park the boat and 3 hours in, and you go into this waterfall, and you have to be greeted by Arutam, the ancestors of the waterfall, the guardians, the gatekeepers of the sacred of this beautiful place that was so pristine, which is now a copper mine. And that is a long story.
Wow. That sounds like a sad story, I have to admit. At least that last part, the part about walking through the waterfall to get to the sacred space, sounds like an amazing story. And it's a perfect intro for the theme of this episode, which is about how plant medicine can bridge business with the sacred. It's a really interesting topic. And I've been so excited for weeks now to roll up my sleeves and dig in. Now, before we get into that, though, let's just do a little bit of background here. You and I have a lot in common, but one thing in common that's particularly germane to this topic is that we're both ex-attorneys, which ain't exactly the most sacred of professions, at least for the most part. Now, one of them, chose to live a life as an attorney that was less than sacred. I'll just put it that way. But one of us chose to give up her life to honor the sacred. I would love to hear a little bit about that.
Well, if you're talking about me, I would hardly say I gave up my life. I gained my life. That is anything sacred is a win. The more we can align and awaken and remember that we are sacred. We all are sacred. We are all nature. And when we are interacting with plant medicines and the spirits of these beautiful plants that are teachers and masters, we are interacting with the sacred. And if we disconnect from that at any point, then it's a moment for pause. And so, I didn't give up anything. I was called by the forest to be a forest defender in my early years. And that led me into law. And I had a windy journey through environmental justice and human rights and And then I ended up in corporate litigation. And it was there that I never forgot the sacred. I never forgot who I was, though I realized how stuck I was to be in this identity crisis and not feeling courageous enough to live on my life on my terms. And it was when I experienced a huge head injury that lasted for 2.5 years, like a brain injury that lasted 2.5 years, which involved plant medicine and the healing. I left corporate litigation where I understand why I was there, because we're everywhere we need to be when we're there. And it definitely played a big part in my journey, though it was leaving there that was years ago, though it was just remembering the sacred and following the breadcrumbs of the sacred to get back to myself, to integrate that into business and all the things. And you know what? business, life, it's all one thing. We're humans here having a human experience. It's all sacred, and all of the medicines that we work with can be sacred or can be used irresponsibly. Let's just say that.
Stephanie, what a rich set of statements, but I will actually go back to the very, very first part of what you just said. You pointed out something that I subconsciously did, but that goes as to one of the fundamental lessons that I've learned on the Webdelics journey, which is that how we frame things, even subconsciously, really does matter and can change the outcomes. Think about this. I did say you basically, I don't remember exactly the words that I used, but it was basically you gave it up to honor the sacred. And you're right. Think about what is embedded within how I was framing that particular word. I was thinking, well, wait a minute, to give up a particular professional identity, one that, by the way, only encompasses a part of who any of us hopefully are, as the entirety and something that had to be given up, rather than a transition from there becoming something that has a net gain. Similarly, one of the things I realized quite early on in my journey into the plant medicine world, what is a drug? And drugs are bad. How we frame what we call plant medicine versus drugs, has a perceptive impact on the discussions that we have and the dialogues that we have around this topic. And so what you just did as you pushed back, rightfully so, on my framing of the underlying question was really important. And it goes as to some key points about what we make of our journeys. Was there a point in which you realized that, or were you certain that you would have a net gain by going into this new phase of your life? Or was it something you were scared of? Or was it something that just sort of happened? Talk to us a little bit about that.
I mean, I still am a licensed attorney. I had my own law firm, and it was like, I think that journey you go on to receive your Juris Doctorate and like
Yeah.
get licensed and practice and whatever you do. Law in itself is, there's so many different ways you can practice law. So when I first became a lawyer, I was doing human rights work in Brazil. It wasn't office work in the sort of litigation sense of practicing law, right? There's so many ways you can practice law. And I think that really goes to how many people will say, oh, lawyers are bad, or lawyers this, or lawyers that. And it's just, it's such a small, it's a worldview that you can realize other people have when someone makes a comment. So to your point about framing anything, including how we work with the sacred and work with plant medicine and work with our lives and our careers, the opportunity to leverage and use the education of law is still with me, always with me, and you too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I subscribe to the universal laws. There's many laws that I would break to do the right thing, and I do. And I will say that online. I believe in our sovereign right to do the right thing, to have integrity, and to walk a path that is in alignment with ourselves and each other and nature. And a lot of laws don't support that. So, or mandates, right? And so, like giving up, there was never giving up. I think it's more of to be in that practice for 7 years where I was, after the journey that I had been on, to end up in the corporate law firm realm. That was me giving up myself. That was me like really being confused in my identity, because it was scary to walk the path of an entrepreneur. It was scary to be a healer. It was scary to be a this or a that, or, and so unluckily at some point around 18 years ago, I realized, or I learned this coaching thing, that you can become a coach and there's no rules and you can make it up, and it's, and it could be everything and anything, and you can leverage all your skills and integrate all of who you are. And so that is what I started building while I was still practicing law. And it was interesting because, on that coaching journey, as a guide, as a facilitator of transformation, you are constantly on your own journey of transformation. And so that like weaving in the sacred with business to what you were saying before is really, it was this journey of like, wait, but I have all this business experience and legal experience and sustainability. Like I come from this environmentalist background. I was like, oh my gosh, sustainability is a thing now. Like we could work with that. And so I've been weaving this journey, and life is just a weave, what we are weaving into. And if we can really stand in that place of integration of all parts of who we are and offer that, that's the gift. So there was never, like, I look back at that now, that corporate experience, and I see the beauty in it. And I think the plants teach us this if we listen. It's that dualistic, like to live in that place of non-duality, to really tap into that place of non-duality, good, bad, right, wrong. It's all beautiful. It's all beautiful.
To me, when I think of the term sacred, going back a little bit to the idea of how we frame things, I do associate the idea of the sacred with the beautiful. When I think about temples I may have gone to in various countries, or churches, or just in nature, maybe that little glen in a forest somewhere that I somehow find sacred in my own way, it's always, in one way or another, beautiful. And thinking about everything that you've just said, as well as how you're framing the journey into the sacred and what it can be and the many ways that it can look, I have to ask you, when you say sacred, what exactly do you mean?
I haven't put words to define this, so that's a beautiful question. Thank you. It's the unnameable. It's the unnameable. It's right relationship. It's reciprocity. It's presence. It's wisdom. It's infinite. And it's reflection for us at all times to see where we are in right relationship with it or not.
Yeah. I'm going to go back to the discussion about law, but I don't want to limit what I'm about to say to the profession of law, because I think that it applies to a lot of people in a whole host of professional situations, business or otherwise. So, nearly 20 of my years practicing were spent working with government agencies. And in these government agencies, there were a lot of folks, who literally were there checking in every day at 9, maybe 9:02, 9:04, and leaving at 5 on the dot after the exact 1 hour break they had, without any sense of meaning, attachment to their job that was discernible. And in fact, when it came to how they approached their job or what they would talk about on the job, it usually was from a place of distance or something that I have to do so I could focus on other things that are important in my life, or something that is literally part of a countdown, usually towards a pension. I literally had employees. There was a rule with the city of New York that you could not terminate someone if they were absent 49% of the time. It had to be over 50% of the time that they were absent. So I had an employee who literally was absent 49% of every month. And so I was never able to get rid of her or encourage her to move on. And when I think about that mentality, one of the tragedies that I would see over and over again was that people that appeared to be sleepwalking through life would leave their careers and then within months die. And so one of the things that I came to associate what I perceived as a disconnect from the sacred or a disconnect from the meaningful in life is literally a physical death sentence.
Wow.
And a theme that's come up over and over again when it comes to plant medicine is how it's healed people psychologically and given them a new lease on life. Thoughts?
That's a very broad statement. Thank you for sharing that. That's a window to um, a state of dis-ease that humanity is in, or this civilization is in. And those are the systems that we're working right now to change. When we talk about systems change and impact, and investing in solutions to world problems that we have right now, and one of them is that I think is being overlooked, is the awakening of consciousness, right? And what are the roads to awakening consciousness that will snap us out of that sleepwalk? So on one hand, I'm sure that I think I've had a different journey than most people I speak to around plant medicine. Psychedelics, I have to say, I don't associate that word with plant medicine. I'm an herbalist. I work with herbs. I make plant medicine. I make, tinctures, and I grow plants and herbs, healing herbs, medicinal plants. And then there are the master teacher plants that I don't grow or work with, and I leave that to the masters and the elders. Though when I think of plant medicine, I think of plant spirit medicine. Psychedelics can be synthetic. So I think those are two different things, and when they're lumped together, it can be confusing for people. So I don't really associate psychedelics with plant medicine. You can have a psychedelic experience with plant medicine, but because the word sort of lumps it all together, to me, it gets confusing. So, and I know of people who have had. For me, the journey was, I'm 20 years old. This is a long time ago. I'm 20 years old, fresh out of college. I moved from New York to California. I met the ancient redwoods. I was by myself, and what I saw was unbelievable. And I was spoken to by these trees. We need your help. And so that I embarked on a journey of forest activism, and that path led me into solidarity with the native tribes of the areas where I was working. And what was I working? I was holding space. I was like there, like I had no choice. I had to be there. That was my assignment at the time. And in those places, I was invited to meetings, like they were prayer meetings for the forest. And so my very first experience with any sort of sacred plant medicine was in a in a teepee, a sacred space with fire in the middle. And it was elders of the Yurok tribe, and we were praying for the forest. It is imprinted me. The codes of that experience are still 30 years later unfolding. I had no idea that was going to happen, or I'm going to a meeting. We're praying. I had no idea that there would be medicine involved, but it was part of the sacred space I was in and experiencing. And so it wasn't, I'm going to have a personal transformation experience. So along my journey, it was time and time again, situation like that cracked me open, that reminded me I'm an earth person, and was part of my like spiritual journey, And so when I witness other people, when I've gone and worked intentionally with plant medicine, the few times that I have actually said, okay, I'm going to do this for me, versus being in a place and that was there on offer. Those times, yeah, I got my ass whooped, man. And it was beautiful, So going back to beauty and sacred, it could be hard, gross, ugly, and scary. And that is beautiful too.
Well, and that goes as to something I'm curious about, because sometimes when people talk about their plant medicine journeys or sacred plant medicine journeys, or even synthetic psychedelic journeys, they talk about facing a part of themselves, having an experience that is negative or scary. And when I have discussed those sorts of experiences with people, sometimes the responses have been along the lines of, well, perhaps that had something to do with the intention you were setting, or perhaps that was something that you needed to see. One guest on the show, I believe, even said something like, when you choose to go into when you choose to look in the mirror, it may show you not necessarily what you want to see, but what's actually there. And what I'm hearing when you're talking about that sort of experience, is the possibility of pain, challenge, even what on the surface could seem ugly or uncomfortable, actually being beautiful, particularly if it's tied to the sacred.
Yeah, well, I mean, like you said, you see temples as beautiful, and we are all temples. We are vessels. We are temples, and like what happens. And I can speak to plant medicine, plant medicine journeys, and synthetic, journeys. Like when I was in my younger years and experienced like other stuff, that was traumatic. It was different. It was distorted energies. So I can't speak to, because I don't know anything about the synthetic, more like structured approach,
Right.
which I really can't speak to that. All I know is that was not my door to go through. And when I opened it, it was ugly. When I embark on the journey of honoring these plant medicines as teachers, it's the same thing in like I don't need to ingest plant medicine, say ayahuasca, say wachuma, say peyote, whatever the plant medicine is. Like I can connect with the spirit of that plant. I used to grow, when I grow herbs, I can connect to the spirit of the plant sometimes and have an experience. And what I'm speaking to your question around, like what is it a window to? These plant medicines are windows to yourself. So yeah, you're going to see parts of yourself that need to be seen, that need to be felt, that need to be heard. And and it's how we can hold it. Like how prepared are you to hold that? And I've been on this transformational journey. I'm a coach, you're a coach, work with people as a guide. I am a medicine woman in the respect of every single thing is medicine for us. Every single conversation, every single experience in this sacred vessel here on this sacred experience called Earth, or our Earth Walk, is medicine that we can extract a lesson, a learning. What do I have to see? The reframe, the every single second. And if we are game for that level of transformation, that is where we're expanding our consciousness. That is where we're awakening. We're expanding our perception of truth, reality, ourselves, everything. And so these plant medicines, these experiences are opportunities to expand that perception. And it could be intense. And if we're not ready for that intensity, that just means that we have more stuff to clear, because what it's doing is it's showing us who we are. And if there's all those distorted layers and programs and patterns on top of the truth of who we are, we're going to see them. And if you, that's why it's a preparation. There is a preparation. There is an integration. That the way we work with that medicine I believe, ought to be a sacred experience, because when you're working with plants, they're spirit. It's a spirit, and it's connecting with your spirit. And so it's a whole journey you get to go on. And when I'm in that space, it's absolutely with somebody who can hold that. And then I get to have a safer, sacred experience connecting with myself through that spirit.
This question is going to sound confrontational, but it's not meant that way. It literally is the door to another set of questions, which is what you've described sounds amazing, and it sounds like something anyone would want to experience if they want to live a fully self-actualized life, or at least a life that is connected. Am I correct in understanding underneath what you've said that this is something that ideally everyone would experience or should experience?
What that type of experience?
That sort of journey, that sort of connection with the sacred within.
I think that's the invitation. I mean, it's not my place to say what everyone should experience. The invitation is for everything about how we be here, how we do business. We talked about the bridge to business. How we do everything is, I mean, think about the extraction on this planet, right? And extraction is a symptom of disconnection from nature, right? If you walked into a forest and you felt the beings, and you are like, I'm in this place, let's go back to the Ashawara territory in Ecuador in 2012. I'm in this beautiful place that happens to be sitting on top of the largest copper reserve in the equatorial belt. And it's pristine and it's magic like you can't believe. And that Ecuador sells this land to a Canadian mining company, whatever the politics are, that this place is now a copper mine, is a sheer representation of disconnection from who we are and from nature and the power of, or potentiality of, I don't know, harnessing the power of that copper without extracting it. And so why am I talking about extraction? How we go about working with any kind of plant medicine or even psychedelic is anything that can alter your consciousness, anything that you want to be mindful of the journey. And is it so much about the intention? I mean, intention is one thing. When you show up for that, you're going to get what you need, no matter what intention you set. You're going to get what you need, and how we can, however we approach it in the least extractive way. The least extractive way is a symbol of our connection to self and other, like, and plant and whatever the scenario is. That's really what sacred is. It's being able to connect in and say, is there right relationship? Is there reciprocity with what this plant is asking of me, or you know what I'm saying? Or the teacher, the space holder, all of it.
I hear what you're saying, but sort of thinking through behind what you're saying, I can't help but conclude that, well, and let's actually take this extraction metaphor a little bit further. And brilliant point, by the way. I had never really thought of any sort of removal of something from the earth as extraction and symbolic, at least, of separation. But it is. You are literally separating copper or diamonds or whatever was in the earth that you've pulled out from the earth. There is a dissociation that's occurring. And thinking through the impact on a larger scale of what that particular type of extraction means. Well, uncontrolled, unchecked, it may lead to an environmental catastrophe that threatens not only our species, but a whole host of other animal species, as well as plant species. Existentially, then, if you take that metaphor in a little bit, as you did, I have to say brilliantly, right? Disassociation from ourselves, extraction from who and what we're meant to be, separation from our separation within the relationship we have with ourselves and others, and the use of these sacred medicines to be able to bring that about. It's hard to imagine that the world wouldn't be a better place if everyone weren't doing that. Because let's face it, issues like racism, poverty, abuse, mistreatment of others, casual cruelty all occurs because on some level or another, we're able to extract the humanity of others from our own humanity. So is it really fair, or can we ethically sit and say we can't judge because the entire world is at risk so long as we maintain that attitude? Or am I being overly dramatic? Because that's entirely possible.
You overly dramatic. I don't think so, dude. Look, psychedelics, plant medicine, it's not linear. You can't expect to have a linear experience. There's nothing linear about it. And so when you're stepping into a space that you're not really, I mean, you can have some, I wouldn't say control, but presence, you can have presence, but it's not a linear experience. And one of the things that you really, one of the ways, I don't know, it really depends how deep you go, dude, because I don't talk, when I talk about the world and I see the world, and my message is about mastering the nonlinear, because the more linear we are, like, okay, extraction here, I'm also talking about our extraction, like going to the disconnection from some human person that can go into a beautiful, pristine forest and actually destroy it. That person is disconnected from nature, from themselves.
Yeah.
Okay. And so when we're even look in the plant medicine world, there's extraction from indigenous wisdom, from indigenous elders, from native people, their traditional knowledges that are appropriated. And I think that there's a definite need in this time and place for all medicines and all knowledge to be shared and wisdom, but also there is an extraction and sometimes one can say an appropriation of indigenous wisdom. And that so those are all of those energetics at play too. And the more we go and say, I'm going to go and have a psychedelic experience for my own transformation, great, good luck. You're only going to get as far as you can get until you realize that you are connected to that curandeira in the jungle in Brazil, that you are connected to the person who grew that plant, who grew the medicine, who prepared the brew. What were they thinking? What were the songs? What were the codes that were in that medicine? And in their ancestral knowledge, when you are in a medicine journey, it's not just, I'm going to take this. It's all the things. It's the songs. It's the shamans, the healers, the growers, the preparers of that medicine and their intentions with that and their connection to the spirit of the medicine in you. So there's like so much going on. It's not linear. Make sense?
It totally does. Although I can't help but wonder, as I think about everything that you just said, the psychedelic renaissance that at least the Western world is going through right now is marked by the legalization. In other words, the emergence from the underground into an accepted, presumably regulatory milieu of the sacred medicines. And with that comes a movement of the sacred possibilities of plant medicine from the nonlinear into a world that's dominated by linear thinking, if by no other means than through a massive regulatory state. And so it also has me wondering then, well, is the psychedelic renaissance perhaps unintentionally leading to a situation in which some of the core components of what the plant medicine renaissance represents being lost?
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. And also, right, the standardization. You can't, you can't kill spirit. You can't kill spirit. So there will be that. There will be that milieu, as you say, and then there will be the living systems of the energetics and the plant medicine world of off-grid. There will always be that because those are master plants and master teachers that you can't standardize. Think about marijuana. I remember in 1990 something, I was in California working on the Prop 218, which was the first proposition to legalize cannabis in California. And that, and I lived in Humboldt County. Okay. So that decriminalized now. I used to live in a place where I had gardens of things, and interestingly, as an activist, I was a forest activist, and it was those plants that were funding our activism, that were buying us, them and Patagonia donating gear. Like we were protecting ancient redwood trees thanks to the growers in the area who were donating money and, food and everything. And so, my point there is to say that was another time. I was early 20s too, and it was a real awareness of that plant medicine, marijuana, ganja. That is if you hang out with those plants in nature, in beautiful places, you can really connect to the spirit. And there's been so much degradation to that spirit, right? In the, you can say legalization, you can say mass production, you can say all kind of distorted, weird energies around it, but there's still the sacred places where that medicine grows and that won't be tamed. Back then, I never really smoked, though, honestly, it was so different to be okay, here's my garden or here's my friend's garden, and then here's some stuff you buy on the street. What? So I think when it comes to psychedelics, it's always going to be that question of where did it come from? Who prepared it? What was their intention? How connected are they? And it's the same thing when you choose a coach, right? It's choose your medicine wisely.
Well, yes. And I have to say that. So I'll keep it totally real with you, Stephanie. Since I got involved with this amazing podcast, and my name gets posted up on Instagram and TikTok and other platforms and associated with it, or an association with it, I've suddenly become very, very popular with salespeople of a certain type. And they DM me on Instagram left and right. I mean, it's a little bit overwhelming, I've got to admit, offering to sell me various allegedly sacred medicines or to commit me to certain experiences. And as I've gone through life and talked to folks that I know about this podcast and how excited I am about how it's transforming me, how much I'm learning, I've also been pointed to a whole host of other people that may know someone that, can get us a little space in that $1 an hour hotel near Times Square, and maybe we could have some sort of sacred experience, and not anything in a sexual way, but right in a allegedly psychedelic experience sort of way that has me question really whether I would be stepping into something sacred or not. Now, I've been around for a day or two on this planet, so I've figured out some things obviously ain't sacred, but sometimes things might seem like they're sacred, and if I'm seeking that sacred space, because that's really what I want from plant medicine, how do I go about making sure that what I'm being offered is something that's legit when it comes to that sacredness?
So I really don't, I can't speak to that as an authority. All I would say is, like anything, how do you eat? Like, if you're not sure about where you're going to get your sacred psychedelic medicine, or not sacred, even if you're not looking for that experience, not everyone needs to be on that path. Like, let's just sort of take it down. Like, it's not down, or let's remove that lens for a minute. Like, I just want to have a transformation. I want to snap out of this, whatever depression or whatever, some ailment I'm experiencing. And I heard that this could be a good path. Where do I go? Ask someone, find a reputable, speak to people, then find someone that you trust. You will talk to enough people and you will find somebody who could point you in the right direction, because we're all in different places and locations. And that's the best advice I'd say, is like, definitely, and do your research. Webdelics, a great website. Like, you're going to have a place to have, where people can do their research. I think, though, even within the space where you might find that people appear trustworthy or appear like, oh, that's an Indigenous person or whatever. I've had a lot of experiences where, it's not all that sacred, even though it could appear sacred or check all the boxes. So it becomes a journey. My dog's sneezing. Becomes a journey of trusting yourself. And look, the process of seeking it out is when the journey begins when you say yes to that journey. You're on that already. So that's first step. Acknowledge that. Like, I'm already in the container. Okay. And so how you hold that part is probably representative of how the next part's going to
go. Let's step back a little bit to the conversation about extraction and business, because I see a connection between the two. Our current economic system, especially at the global scale, but even on the local level, is by and large predicated on a model that has, on the one hand, extraction in order to provide supply, and consumption in order for a demand to exist to allow people to profit off of the extraction that they have. Let's imagine for a second a world in which more and more business people integrate psychedelic experiences, plant medicine experiences, or, narrowing it down a little bit more, sacred plant medicine experiences. And the idea of extraction and or disconnection from the sacred, or from who and what we are in connection with both ourselves and the other elements of the world that we live in, merges into the larger business consciousness. In other words, literally on a large scale, and I know this is fantastical, but we might be on the verge of opening the door to this sort of thing happening. The bridge between business and sacred actually happens, and on a large scale. One thing that I have to wonder is whether our current economic model could even sustain such a shift. And honestly, if it looked like such a shift was moving forward wholesale, whether the existing forces invested in the current economic model would fight it so hard that it might be shot down. None of us can predict the future, but let's pull out a crystal ball here for a minute and see what we can do. What would you imagine that might look like?
It's happening now. It's happening now. And exactly what you said, there's the pushback. There's the, it's happening now. And it doesn't necessarily come in the form of Buddha landing in Times Square and, awakening Kundalini for everyone walking to work. It could also
That'd be kind of cool if it happened, though, I've got to say.
I know, right? It's actually interesting because a lot of times things are happening that we've asked for and we don't see it because it's not linear. It's not like, oh, it should look like that. It's things are unfolding in the invisible. And let's just make this akin to a psychedelic journey. Now, one of the ways that I love to share my reality is that we live in a holographic reality. Macro, micro, macro, micro. So me as an individual, I am like one cell, and we talk about unity, consciousness, and oneness. And even if you were, say you go and experience ayahuasca and you're like, oh my God, I had this sensation that we were all one. Yeah, that's the medicine because we are. Well, what does that really mean in real life? In real life, meaning in this dimension, because those plant spirits are taking us into other dimensions to see what is true from another dimension's perspective. And so this dimension here now, if we talk about unity, what is unity consciousness? It is me doing my inner work so that business can operate in that sacred way, so that I can release all of where extraction lives in me, so that I can release where all of racial inequity, that hatred of other, where that hate lives in me. Where do I hate myself? Where do I judge myself? Where does all of that live in me, right? And when we clear that up in ourselves, then we are awake, we're more connected. That's clearing the distortion. And so in business is run by people. So when enough people get that opportunity to connect to themselves so deeply and to connect to that oneness, to connect to nature so deeply, then it translates into the daily life. It's like how we do business and things change. And so my experience since like 1990s in forest activism up till now is there's been a huge shift in consciousness. And what happens when it gets closer and more people are awakening, think about the times that you've almost come to your closest breakthrough. You had to break down. You probably went through the darkest night of the soul ever in order to break through.
Yes.
And so our life here on earth might look like that. Pandemics, die off. I have like all these beautiful old trees where I live, and there's the beech leaf disease and the ash beetle, and they're dying off. And oh my gosh, big, huge trees I have to take down, and I'm like the tree person. And so we are experiencing that break down before the breakthrough. And it might need to be that the economic system completely breaks down, and that those conversations are happening. Can we have systems change, really, like change the old, or do we need to create new systems? And I think psychedelics come in a great way there, because they allow us to expand these like breakthroughs that get to happen with the chemical interactions in our brains and in our bodies allow us, and then if you want to talk the spirit and the sacred, allow us to see with a different perception other possibilities.
And with the challenges that we are facing both socially and on a global scale, it's hard to argue that creation, innovation, new ideas are not going to be increasingly necessary. And let's face it, in the psychedelic/plant medicine world, one of the most common uses for it historically has been, particularly in the arts community, around enhancing creativity. Now, if that were to move out from the arts community more wholesale into the business community, then conceivably, we would be in a better position to utilize that creativity with a larger vision towards connecting ourselves, or at least pulling ourselves from a purely extractive and consumptive model into something a little bit more sacred, for lack of a better word. Maybe that could begin to help us heal on a global scale, just as psychedelics help us heal internally.
Yeah. And I think that just like business and just like vaccines and every other kind of medicine that came to save the world, there's unintended consequences. And so that's where the mindfulness, like psychedelics, just like any industry, if it turns into an industry, it bears an imprint of what's a model of an industry, right? And it's how it is held and the integrity with which not just the spaces, but the whole industry is created, that is going to tell the future. Because you can talk about those artists that used that there's a handful that came with the philosophies and the contributions to ways of thinking, and then those that came with the ways of seeing and expression. And there's a lot of people who never even came back. Your soul can get lost. You need to be careful. This is no joke. It is not a place to play with. And I actually have a friend who did not have, I'm going to share about this. My friend, in her apartment in Spain during the lockdowns, decided to take what she had, some plant medicine that was given to her by a shaman, and where she was in ceremony in another country. I will just keep that out. But she ended up passing out and having a seizure, and was found at 4 days later because she was alone by herself, and is now not the same person she was, and doesn't remember anyone or anything. And
Whoa.
It's a whole, yeah. So like I'm saying, like, it's not to be taken lightly. And so I've also experienced, on another hand, like in New York City, let's just talk about the energetics of the portals that are opened when you are, say in your Times Square, and we're going to have a shaman come, and we're going to have a ceremony. Like, even if it's shaman, or if it's not, if it's something else, right? And like, I personally believe, and this is just my personal belief, is that an experience is that we're opening portals. And when I talk about the dimensions, it really is. It's like, I believe in multidimensionality, and as multidimensional beings here, we can access different dimensions, and that's my journey. So in knowing that and seeing that on my path, I'm not saying this is anyone else's truth. We need to be careful about the energies that we're unleashing. If you're not like preparing your body, and if you're not doing the proper integration, and you're just like walking out to the office the next day, and like, what are you bringing with you? I don't even walk near bars. I can see the energy there, like at night, and it's no disrespect or judge. It's energy. And so when we're accessing those altered states, we are open. That went all over the place, but
yeah, but I think it raises some interesting points. First of all, it does remind me of a conversation I had with someone about a female that this person knew, who went on a psychedelic journey. And during that journey, and it had been after multiple journeys she had, she felt that she was offered a choice by those that were inhabiting the space that she was taking the journey with. And that choice was to come back and reintegrate into our world, or simply stay there forever. And she said that for the first time, or she told my friend that for the first time, she understood how people could get lost in it forever, because it was tempting, it was blissful, it was peaceful. There wasn't all of the crap that we have to deal with day to day in our more mundane existence. And so it was profoundly tempting. But she nonetheless felt that she had a responsibility to come back, that she was able to see that for her at least, that was a temptation and it was a dangerous temptation. It sounds to me like that sort of experience, when we talk about connecting with the sacred, when we talk about transformation, when we talk about becoming more creative, when we talk about transforming ourselves internally and building businesses and new economic systems, all of that does sound grand and it sounds incredible. It sounds powerful. But there is a dark side to almost everything that we can experience in this world if we're not careful. And one of the things that we're committed to here in Webdelics is being honest about the whole picture and not just mindlessly cheerleading, but saying, okay, these are the opportunities, but let's keep it real. These are the risks. And so your honesty about that is of tremendous value to this audience, because they could be listening and ready to jump into a place without the whole picture.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm a natural person. So I have a house with zero medication, pharmaceutical medication. And so for me, that path of natural healing, believing in frequency technologies and all kinds of ways we can access that transformation through psychedelic experiences. I don't know if you ever heard of frequency technologies and the amazing ways we can transform ourselves using frequencies. Wow. So there's so many different paths we can go on to access that truth and that healing. And I think the biggest question is always, like, if someone's listening and they're curious and they heard that it's a good path to have a breakthrough and like change their life or, heal from depression or whatever it is. It's like, well, there are a lot of paths for that. And so really knowing yourself, knowing your body, knowing your tolerance, if you know people, knowing your network, and do you have the right people that you feel like you can trust to point you in the right direction. I think, to speak to what you just said, this is a huge encyclopedia. And you think about Indigenous people who in their area or whatever tribes that knew the master plants. There's a reason why they're master plants. And when they would go through initiation processes with their, initiating people into working with those plants, these are long studies, like they study and they have to go through these deep processes. And it's almost like we're at this place in time where we're speeding things up, right? We don't have the time to go through 18 years in a cave to learn the secrets of the universe. Okay. Yeah. If there is a substance that can help us with that, maybe it is time. And so that's why these things are emerging. Okay. And that's why they're emerging. And let us remember that, like, there are ways that people work with these things. And like, even if you're in a space with other people, and there's other people having their experience, how do you know how to stay in your own space and not be influenced by all of that's going on around you? There are things you look at is there a fire? We work with the elements, right? There's just so many things, like to ground the experience, or to, if you are having that out of body, like whatever the experience is, who's there to help you come back? Do they know how to do that, to anchor you in your body? Like, there are so many things that, it's hard to cover it all here, but to the point that, just going back to that point around extraction and where we're going in our future, is like, it's a kind of, we're at that point of chaos where there's so many options and there's so much happening for good, and there's always that polarity until I believe that we can transcend that place of polarity and duality when we tap into like our perception of another dimension. And when I say that, I mean like the fifth dimension, where everything is 3D here right now, right? We talk about the fifth dimension as a place where we can actually see the mythical quality of everything, not when you're on plant medicine, like when you're here now. And so if you can start to do, I would always just recommend for folks, like, do the work first, do some inner work first, find that person, do the work first. Like, you got to, prepare with certain medicines. You want to prepare your body for a month, cleanse, no sugar, no salt, no meat, no sex, no alcohol, so that you can be a pure vessel to go in with these, like ayahuasca, for example. So if you don't, then what happens? and if you don't know how to integrate, then what happens? Those are big questions too.
One final series of questions that I have goes as to the power of your message. When I started this podcast, I will openly confess that the spiritual framework that I was operating within was by and large grounded in the traditional Christian belief system that I grew up in. And that while not holding the privileged position in Western culture that it once did, still has massive social, intellectual, and cultural currency. In addition, in my day-to-day operations, I was, in contrast to that, almost completely secular. And not only that, but secular in the most materialist way possible. If I can't see it, smell it, touch it, taste it, feel it, it don't exist. I don't want to hear about it. But I might accept it if I heard about it growing up through my traditional religious background, or if it was in a similar tradition that I was exposed to. A lot of the ways that you have framed the sacred sound to me, and I would love to hear your thoughts about this, rooted in a completely different spiritual tradition and certainly use radically different spiritual language. How can that message, because I think that your message is powerful, it needs to be heard, it really speaks to me, Stephanie. How can that message begin to cross the bridge between that language set and the language set of those from these more traditional religious or even outright materialist mindsets?
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's so good. That's a great question. So in every tradition, in every spiritual or religious tradition, the most spiritual, let's just say, those who are devoting their life to the study and the texts and the translation, to living in accordance with the principles of that religion, the priests, the rabbis, the people who, or the Kabbalists, they're really tapping into the same thing, and they know that. The dogma, the rhetoric, whatever, it might be different, but they're tapping into the same energy, and they know that at that those higher states of consciousness, and so it's sacred. And every religion. I grew up in Judaism, and as a Jewish girl from New York, it's and what's interesting is the way I grew up, going to a temple, a shul, a synagogue, and it was all the prayers were in Hebrew, and I didn't speak Hebrew. I actually learned how to speak Hebrew, but I didn't even know what it meant.
Wow.
So I was singing the prayers, reading Hebrew, but I had no idea what any of it meant. Like the whole 3 days of a holiday, And so similarly, I go to the jungle and I'm there on some activist mission to protect the forest, or the oil situation there. And I am in a place where, say a ceremony that they're singing Icaros or songs that are unlocking the power of these plant medicines, for example, and I'm feeling it. Just the same way in the synagogue, I'm feeling my ancestors. My great grandfather was a cantor. He used to sing those songs, and I'm connecting to my lineage and that sacred thing. So we all know what it is if we really dropped into that the highest sacredness of whatever religion or tradition we know, or that our self remembers. But our soul remembers that we're earth people, that we are earth people, that we live with fire, that we live with air, we breathe with air, that we need water, right? That we are grounded here on earth. And how do we start to acknowledge if you read the Bible, if you read the Torah, if you the Quran, all sacred texts are connected to nature.
Yeah.
And so when we can start remembering, that is what connects us, because we are nature. Yeah. And so when I talk about sacred, it could be spiritual, it could be whatever words resonate, right? But it's really just about connecting to what is that spiritual element that you connect to if you're in church, or if you can go back to that old lineage from your family. What were they connecting to? Maybe they knew it or not, And so do I want to go deeper into that? Do I resonate with that language? Maybe not, And what does this other stuff mean? It's just earth. When I talk about codes, or I talk about ancestral wisdom, it's the same ancestral wisdom of my lineage and your lineage, right? This is just it's a lineage that's bringing forth what we need now to remember who we really are. And that is it's like stripping all of the religious politics, and this is just earth. It's connecting us to earth. And so the psychedelic experience, when I talk about the sacred, it's like, do you consider yourself sacred? It's that connection to self. My tagline on my website: remember who you really are so you can do the work you're really here to do. And that is what we go to: synagogue, church, the teepee, the maloka. That's what we go for, right? And so it's like just stripping it all away to the basics. And so many people don't want to connect to themselves, and so we like get wrapped up in these words and whatever. But it's like, are you ready to connect to yourself on the deepest level you've ever connected to yourself, so that you can remember who you really are?
And that, Stephanie, is what I call ending a conversation with a bang. There has been a lot that we've covered in this conversation. If there is one thing that I can just immediately pull from it, although if I think about it for more than 2 seconds, I could easily come up with 10, I would say that the idea of extraction being a version of disconnect, that as a social and economic matter we engage in without thinking, being really an externalization of what we're living day to day without us even realizing it, analyzing that metaphor, and then processing what that may mean when it comes to thinking through sacred plant medicines as a way to bridge business and the sacred. I can't help but leave with a reframe and a different openness to the possibilities that sacred plant medicines present. If there's one last takeaway that you would like to share, what might that be?
I'd love to add on to that a double reframe on the word extraction.
Please.
So, when you make a tincture meaning like you put some yarrow or a plant like rosemary in oil, in olive oil, or you put something in what do you call it? I forgot what it's called. If you put it in say olive oil, you're extracting the properties, the oils, the medicinal properties of the plant, right? And so when we are going through a situation, are we extracting the lesson? Are we extracting the gift? So all of the medicines, be it standardized, psilocybin, whatever, synthetic or not, whether it's ayahuasca or wachuma, whatever it is, how is it extracted? So, we can extract the frequencies of copper without extracting copper from the earth, perhaps. So really it's a reframe, an invitation to reframe how we extract, not necessarily cancel extraction.
Powerful. Stephanie, where can people find out more about you and ideally follow you? Because I know they're going to want to.
You can find my website, stephanietraeger.com. And I also have a podcast called catalysttalks.com. We go deep there too. And I think everything else, I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram at Stephanie Traeger, and it's all findable from there.
Well, I like I said, I think a lot of people will end up wanting to learn more about you, and I think rightfully so. Stephanie, it has been fantastic having you today.
Thank you, Scott.
Actually, thank you. Now, if you enjoyed today's episode, wait till you hear about what we have coming up. We have everything from a discussion about how to prepare for your first psychedelic journey, to discussions about psychedelics and aging, to discussions about psychedelics and dealing with end of life. It's deep, meaningful, provocative, and transformative stuff. And I can't wait to dig into it with everyone who's listening to or watching this show. If you have enjoyed today's episode, and I know you have, make sure that you subscribe to the Webdelics Podcast on your favorite audio podcast platform or on YouTube, and do leave us a 5-star review or a set of comments on YouTube. Most importantly, be sure to tell everyone that you know about what we're doing. We want the word to get out. Then be sure to connect with us on all of our social media platforms: Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn. Also, go to our website, webdelics.com. That's webdelics.com. And subscribe to our blog for trusted, credible, and objective information about psychedelics and plant medicine. Then be sure to come back next time for another episode of the Webdelics Podcast.